So yeah, I had a few problems with this game. I would not call this one of my best reviews, although I am pretty proud of how well it came out considering all the problems I ended up having with it. And most of those problems were my fault, I'm not making excuses. I think where I first went wrong was when I promised, I think, 3 or 4 reviews in the month of October, which is much faster than I'm accustomed to working, although it was good to put some pressure on myself. It did lead to some problems because I hadn't fully researched out the subjects that I was going to do. And the first problem was Nightmare, which I didn't realize how many Nightmare games there were. Even though I had them all, I looked in the closet and I realized that I had kept, there are about like 12 to 14 games and expansions in total with Nightmare, and I had spent most of my allotted time and script pages explaining the first one, and I hadn't even begun to touch on the expansions to even the first game. So it was going to be a much bigger undertaking than I initially thought, and one I'm willing to take on because the tapes are actually very hilarious, even beyond the first one. But when I led into Pumpkinhead, I had only played it very briefly, and I knew I wanted to review it, but I had pretty much... I didn't know how to get into the paintings, but the movie clips, but I figured I would learn more about it, find some information online, and play it later, while I was scripting out the Pumpkinhead review, and oh my god, I really am not kidding when I say this is probably the most obscure game I've ever seen, because I could barely find evidence that it even exists beyond the jewel case that I was holding in my hand. I'll explain why you can see through Linkara later in a minute. I'm not too proud of the green screening, but I was under some time pressure. It was just incredible. I've never run into any game I could find so little on. I mean, I've obscure Japanese import games. I could find nothing. I spent about 5 days of research on this one, way more than I ever thought I would. Looking online, not just Googling, I mean like hardcore looking, interviewing some friends of mine who are into obscure games and stuff like that. And they never even heard of it. They're like, Pumpkinhead, is that a movie? That was about all I knew. And I spent so much time trying to find just the blurb. I couldn't, let alone cheat code. I was really hoping to find just like a God mode code so I could wander through this game and at least get to the ending or some more cutscenes here. But no, there was nothing. I couldn't even figure out how to work the basic functionality of this game. And so I had to buy another copy with the box and instruction book just to get some kind of bearings. And actually, even the instruction book didn't work. The most useful thing I found was a YouTube video that showed me how to drag the crystals onto the movie screen. And that was pretty much the biggest help I could find right there. But I don't know how the other guy did it. The online footage I found, he managed to get to like the second level, and I was never able to get that far. So I played this for about a week, and I couldn't get past the point where the children would take my inventory. And I still don't know what causes that. Somebody emailed me saying that they thought there was a movie clip that's not actually in the film, but it's in this game that was filmed especially for the game, where some guys are loading stolen equipment off a truck, like cardboard boxes, stereos, things like that. And if you take that stuff, the children say it's stolen, and they take everything. You're not supposed to take some things, but the book never tells you that. Now, what's funny is, this clip right here where the old lady says, "Beware of, you're entering the world of Pumpkinhead," that is not in the film. So far, I've been able to determine that the much vaunted movie clips that were filmed especially for the game were the clip of the people moving boxes off a truck, which may have just been footage of stage crew, like, striking the set, and this. They filmed this for the game. They sat the old lady down in front of a fire, had her not move, and say, "You're entering the world of Pumpkinhead." That's fucking it! Anyway, I had promised this by Halloween, and I really started to get into a panic. I mean, you have no idea. And what was worse was I lost about 2 weeks of time because I was so sick. I was so tired all the time. I could barely get up, and I just couldn't think straight, let alone write funny scripts. And so I'd lost about 2 weeks of my promised time, so I was cramming like 3 or 4 reviews into 2 weeks, which I was running myself ragged. And I had no footage. I had footage from the first level, where I basically get all my shit taken, and so I played for about a week, and I had maybe 10 minutes worth of usable footage just where I'm like running around and shooting things and getting killed. I lost even more time because this gave me probably the worst case of writer's block I've ever had, and it's all because of this little story I had going on where the gatekeeper or the gate cleaner sends me to the Blago, and I had this plot line where, before I'd played the game, I had this thing where I get pulled in, and the Blago is full of all these FMV games, and I'm picking through them, and I'm like, oh, Pumpkinhead, I should play this. And then I started thinking, like, I don't know why I cared so much about the continuity, but I do. And I started thinking, like, wait, is there a computer in the Blago? Like, does the gate cleaner let me have this thing? And so I just knew people would ask questions like, how are you playing this game in the black hole? And what was worse was, I think the real story of this was my continued frustrations in finding any information on this thing. So all of a sudden I was like, how do I explain this story in the context of me being in the black hole? And I just couldn't think of anything. Like, am I not allowed to leave until I finish Pumpkinhead? I don't know. This whole idea of me being in the black hole started getting worse and worse to me as it went on, and I really wished I hadn't done it. I really wish I just kind of sat in a chair and be like, I got this game and it sucks, And so I think what it is with me is I like most of my reviews to have some kind of overarching plot or like a thesis, some unifying concept that ties the review together. I don't just like to get in front of the camera and say, here, I picked a random game and here's why it sucks. I usually like to have some kind of personal connection to the game and explain why it sucks and, why it makes me mad and, like, how this kind of ties into just some element of my personality, you know what I mean? That's why the writer's block is really weird for me, because writing the review itself, like writing the jokes and the commentary on the movie clips or the video clips, not a big deal, but the thing that really, really kills me lately is the intro and the conclusion to every video, because I'm always trying to come up with that thesis that starts the review and then kind of concludes the review, and so you've kind of learned something, there's kind of a moral to it, and there's not always, but, like RoboWar, where I'm saying, like, things don't have to be good to be awesome, and sometimes being awesome is enough. That was the whole moral, and even that took me a little while to come up with, but not nearly as long as this, and so I really had to struggle to come up with a way to tell a story with this one, and I figured the story should just be the story of how I kind of failed with this review, so to speak, and I also had to kind of explain my own thought process in trying to understand this game, because I was like, okay, well, maybe it helps to understand if I see the movies, and so I had to track down the movies. And so I really dreaded watching the movies, because let's face it, a movie called Pumpkinhead you don't exactly have the highest hopes for. And, if you come into this not expecting a classic, it's not Citizen Kane, to paraphrase my fans, Pumpkinhead 1 is actually pretty good. I was very pleasantly surprised with this one. The effects are very good, and Lance Henriksen is pretty kick-ass. He actually plays very much against type, I find. He tends to play very cool, composed, intellectual type characters, and as you can see here, he kind of plays a dumb hick who's very passionate and very hot-headed, and, he plays a very tortured soul here who's dealing with the death of his son. And yeah, you could say he kind of hams it up here and chooses to overact. But I think in the context of this horror movie, he does a very, very good job. Pumpkinhead 2, on the other hand, was one I knew was going to be very bad because just, look at it. But I was actually able to find a little information on the movie itself, and they said it was non-canonical, which kind of slayed me in the same way that Highlander 2 is kind of non-canonical. What I found funny was on the advice of some of my fans, I've heard the other two movies beyond this one are okay, and so I got them cheap in a bargain bin. Actually, they were right in the bargain bin. Pumpkinhead 3 and 4, but I don't even think Pumpkinhead 4 is called that. It's called Pumpkinhead Ashes to Ashes, and I was rather surprised to learn that both of them have Lance Henriksen in it. And to spoil the movie for you slightly, Lance Henriksen dies at the end of the first one. I was like, how the fuck did they get him back for 3 and 4? I think he's some kind of ghost, or maybe he's he is Pumpkinhead? I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny how both of these Pumpkinhead movies start out with a case of vehicular homicide. And what I always... this sketch came out of... I just found it amazing that these kids were having fun and like having woo-woo type hilarity by driving around the backwoods with their headlights off. That was like, that seems like fun to you? You'd think he'd want to take better care of his car. I wouldn't be like, hey, I know what's fun, guys. Let's drive around drunk in my car with the lights off. Woo! Yay! And then they look so stunned when they hit something. But I wasn't kidding before when I said this has absolutely nothing to do with the first one. I mean, there is nothing consistent other than the fact that there is a character who kills people named Pumpkinhead. But nothing even about that is consistent. Like, it's not a demon. This is actually, like, the demonified soul of this lady's son. And even that is not consistent with the first movie. The old lady, nothing to do with the old lady in the first movie. And the old lady in the first movie comes back later in the third and fourth ones, and I really need to see that then. I think this is where I start talking about Soleil Moon Frye, probably the only real curiosity of this movie. And seriously, whenever I bring this movie up, they go, "Oh, Soleil Moon Frye's in that, right?" And people did ask whether or not this is pre or post breast reduction. Like, that's the only thing people know about her. And I'm not kidding. She looks really, really good in this movie. And but she's not really in this movie. She's kind of the boyfriend of an ancillary character. And she doesn't really have much to do with the story. Pretty much, this is the only time she says anything of substance, was when she goes inside the old lady's cabin. She goes, "I recognize this. This is a resurrection spell, and I've seen this in magic books." And then really nothing else comes of it. She gets killed. Like, I think Pumpkinhead shoves a piece of rebar through her torso, and this kind of discards her. It is rather amusing to me how the whole breast reduction thing has far overshadowed anything else she's ever done, and you wouldn't think that, especially considering she was Punky Brewster, something I think would have been much greater fodder for scorn and ridicule, backstage. If you knew her personally or you were working with her on set, I don't think I'd make fun of the breast reduction. I would make fun of the Punky Brewster and the hair and things like that, and then she would hit me and then mace me and then stomp me in the daddy marbles when I'm down. But I wouldn't be like, "Hey, those boobs are really small now. What, were they too big?" The monster looks really, really cheap in this one too. The big rubber hands and stuff like that. Oh, Punky, no. See, right there, she's toast. I think the best part of this movie. Everyone was very kind to point out the fact that the sheriff in this movie plays Garrick, the Cardassian barber in Deep Space Nine. And here's where I lose a lot of credibility with the nerds again, because I'll be honest, I did not recognize him, because I don't think I saw more than a half dozen episodes of the first season. I didn't like it, and I never watched Deep Space Nine again. I know, it's just fucking heresy, but I was always kind of an old school Trekkie. I liked the original, I liked Next Generation, and then I saw Deep Space Nine and was not blown away by it. I think the lines were drawn long ago when it comes to the whole Star Wars, Star Trek, which is better debate, and I was one of those assholes who sided with Babylon 5. So, when I saw Deep Space Nine, I saw a cheap knockoff of Babylon 5, and, I'm just saying, this was like, 12, 15 years ago, and, whether right or wrong, that's how I initially evaluated that show, and I didn't care. And I think even fans will admit that it took, somebody said it took like 3 or 4 seasons for it to really hit its stride, and I was like, man, how long do you got to sit and watch a show before trying to convince yourself you like it before it actually kind of becomes good? You give anybody 3 or 4 seasons, they'll probably figure out some kind of winning formula. But I will admit, and I probably should go and watch the show. But I think when I finally started getting back into Star Trek, the show that was on was Voyager, and I hate Voyager. You have no idea. And I just kind of went like, oh, Voyager's so bad. I don't want to watch Deep Space Nine either. Oh, Enterprise, no. And really, I think Star Trek has not been very good. Like Enterprise, Voyager are terrible. And I think you really got to be a hardcore Trekkie to fool yourself into liking that one. But yeah, I was a bigger Babylon 5 fan because it was just a very definite 5-season arc, and it was over. They put the knife in it at that point. I mean, yeah, they did Crusade, but I don't even think B5 fans really cared about that one. Where was I? I kind of lost my train of thought here. I kind of make this up to be a big deal of me seeking out the boxed version of Pumpkinhead, which was actually very, very hard to find. But truth be told, it wasn't that expensive. I think it was $9, not counting shipping. And I'll tell you, that was the hardest $9 I ever had to spend. I was like, I can't believe who's dumb enough to pay $9 for this piece of shit again, twice. But I did it. Like I said, it wasn't that expensive, but it was really, really hard to find. And this wasn't as simple as finding it on eBay. Actually, the eBay copies are much more expensive. And I hate to say it, but I've probably done a lot to drive up the collector's value of this game. But don't buy it. It's so bad. If you can even get it to work, it's just horrible. I was blown away by the story because I really wanted to see how it justified any of this first-person shooter crap, and it really doesn't. It has all this nonsense about you being some kind of metaphysical spirit keeper construct, which is, I swear to God, not a word of this is, except maybe Farron Woods, is used in the movies. None of it. And what's weird is, you'd think you could actually make a kind of convincing concept. You'd really have to stretch, but you could make a shooter in a slasher-type game where, I don't know, where, in the real world, maybe you're stuck in a shopping mall or a convenience store or a dorm and Pumpkinhead's chasing you and there's other enemies. But, you really wouldn't have to stretch. You wouldn't have to do this thing where you're in the netherworld and demons are chasing you. Ugh. The book is actually very thick, and you might think I left a lot out, but I really didn't. About a full half of the book is just kind of the credits, where it's like the programmers, the sound crew, the music credits, and basically like a reprint of the movie credits, where it lists all the stars of the movie and stuff like that. There's like 4 note pages, whoever uses those. And the book goes into great detail on other things, but it's things that I never got to see. Like, it'll explain the other 2 levels, which are, I think, the Gatekeeper's Realm and Hell. I think Hell is another level, like Purgatory or something like that. And then you enter Pumpkinhead's Realm, which is deeper than Hell. It's worse than Hell. And yeah, that's where you face Pumpkinhead, but you don't actually kill him, you just give him an object. You give him the Blair Witch doll, apparently. Somebody emailed me and told me to do that. So really you just gotta kind of run from Pumpkinhead if you get that far. And yeah, how much you want to bet the ending to this game is nothing more than a text screen that says, congratulations, you have put Pumpkinhead at peace. I don't know. This same person, I'm sorry I forget your name, I only remember you by your online name, but the person also told me how to regain health, because I said I didn't know how to heal. And apparently you can run through walls that are seeping blood if you have the vial of blood that you collect from the old lady's house FMV, and once you get through that you can bathe in lava, collect an item, and then you can heal. And apparently that's essential to playing the game, but there were some secret passages, but I left that out. I only found one, really, and it didn't really gain me anything. It was access to a treasure chest. But yeah, it's obviously right. The book at no point makes any mention of walking through walls holding a vial of blood. It never mentions what the little spiral designs do. What items you can take, what items you shouldn't. So, as you can imagine, I really didn't have to work that hard to work up some legitimate fury for this one, especially since when I was editing this together, my computer was crashing all the time. And I had just installed Windows 7, but actually Windows 7 was not the problem. Vegas kept crashing, the software I used to edit. And the HD footage I've been using, I didn't used to record in HD, but I do now. I use so much HD footage now that my computer just couldn't handle it. And you actually need a fairly good computer to handle HD footage, and I was juggling so much of it in Vegas that it was just running out of memory, and so basically every edit I made, I ran completely out of memory. So I had to go out and buy 8 gigs of memory, which is the most you can conceivably cram into a machine with like 4 slots. And I got the 64-bit version of Windows, which was a little more painful to install than I anticipated, but actually not that bad. But until I did that, Vegas would crash so often that, I mean, I had to render this file in like 5 4-minute chunks or so, like 5 or 6 chunks, because that was all I could render at one time without it bombing on me. And the worst part was Vegas takes like 90 seconds to 2 minutes to fully load, or at least it does when I'm loading as many video files as I do here, because I have so many video captured files, so many HD clips, that it just takes a really long time. And you wouldn't think it'd be that big, but, you know, the HD files will be, you know, at least for I'd say about a gig a minute, maybe a little more. It's a lot of math these computers are crunching, and you need a really good computer to do it. And the memory was not as expensive as I initially thought it would be, and I have no idea what these items are. Yeah, the recorded, especially for the movie, that footage of a car pulling behind boxes. The cigarette always slays me. I didn't have enough health when I used it to really illustrate how bad it is. But that cigarette basically saps your life just instantly, and you're like, what's going on? You're trying to unequip the cigarette, and you're just dead, man. I have no idea if it has any beneficial impact whatsoever. I really don't think so. I also had written a tirade against this game, but I had so many tirades against this game, they all kind of blended together, but I cut it. And basically what I said in that one was, just why this? You know, why... If you're going to make a first-person shooter, A, do you base it on the Pumpkinhead series? And if you're going to base it on the Pumpkinhead series, why do you base it on Pumpkinhead 2? Like, just base it on Pumpkinhead 1. I mean, you could... Why number 2? That's, like, the worst one. And if you're going to make a rip-off game, you know, I wish they had made a rip-off game. People accused of being a Doom rip-off, I wish. Yeah, if you'd have ripped off Doom, this might not have been half bad. This was after games like Quake. Way after games like Quake. If you could have just repackaged Quake, called it Pumpkinhead's Revenge, and it would have been more believable. It would have been more acceptable than this. And, you know, that's not out of the realm of possibility. I've seen extremely transparent copies of Quake with different names. Like, I lost count of the number of map packs that people released independently. I'm so glad I asked Benzai to do these cameos, because it really worked out well. I don't know why I didn't think of it at first to do this part where I scream and torture, and Benzai kind of does, that's the sound of ultimate suffering. And he kind of looks so sincere and wistful when he looks away, and he's like, my heart made that sound when I saw Sonic turn into a werewolf. And, like, seriously, the guy's got acting chops, and I can't believe I didn't... Yeah, I'll be honest with you, my first choice for this one was Little Miss Gamer, but she was unavailable. I actually couldn't find her. She'd gone on vacation when I tried to find her, and I don't know why I thought of Little Miss Gamer for this one, but man, Benzai was such a good choice, especially him with Barry. I had not seen much of Barry up until that point, and you really fall in love with little guy. Do you think we should go help him? Like, you know, it's like that's so cute. But yes, thank you, Benzai, for putting so much work in for me, and at such short notice. I was really coming down to the deadline here, and I was like, can you do this now? And he's like, yes, of course. I was like, well, thank you, good. And he actually gave me a ton of different takes. I said, I outlined just the gist of the script, and I said, like, could you record this? And anything you want to do to ad-lib, you would really save my life on this one. He's like, sure, Spoony, do it. And he recorded, like, probably 10 minutes of different takes of things he could say, and it was awesome. It was really good. People really asked if I was okay after this review. They were like, are you going to be all right? You seemed really angry, and, like, were you really joking? Like, I don't know, people watched this show, and they were like, is he really going out intending to stab people? Like, do you really think I would make a video declaring my intention to do that if I was serious? I'm fine. It was just, I was really angry about the game, yes, but I wasn't gonna stab people in the brain. Come on. Oh, thanks again to Linkara for also recording some stuff on relatively short notice for me. I'm sorry you're a little transparent in the chroma key footage. To be honest, that's my fault, because the Vegas was crashing so much that I couldn't really get a good key, and I couldn't make the good edits with the HD footage, and so I kinda sorta had to half-ass it. because otherwise it really wasn't going to work at all. And it's kind of hard to explain, but I really got tied up with a lot of different things. But I think it came out all right, so thanks again. I'm going to post some of that Benzai footage later, so see you guys.